Welcome to the Ashby Village Science and Ideas Group. I'm Joe Evinger, and I coordinate this group's events with the help of our co-host and tech experts, Hillary Naylor and Sarah Evinger, who will soon introduce today's speaker. Here at Ashby Village, we have a varied educational and work experience backgrounds of our members, but all of us share a common interest in science and new ideas. We currently have over 70 members in our group and another 100 on our mailing list. We meet via Zoom the second Thursday of most months from 3 o'clock until about 4:30. We have a different guest speaker each month who speaks on a topic related to science and ideas. Coming presentations include on November 13th, Paul Rocket will speak to us on this topic, the state of international nuclear proliferation and its likely future. Special thanks to Kara Kazaya for finding this speaker. We do not plan a presentation for the busy month of December, nor is there one planned for October, as several of us, including me, will be on vacation. Sometime early next year, we have a biostatistician. She is considering speaking to us on her work in dementia-related research. If you personally know anyone who might present to us, please recommend them to me along with their contact information. We invite all Ashby Village members to join our group. Others interested in Ashby Village and our presentations also are welcome. Uh, Ashby Village is a 501c3 tax-exempt organization. I ask Hillary now to place a link to the website of Ashby Village in the chat. To our guests, please consider a donation to Ashby Village or even joining our organization via the website. Sarah Evinger will now introduce today's daughter and son team, Joan Straumanis and Andrei Straumanis. Sarah?
That would be mother and son.
Did I say? I'm sorry.
You said daughter and son. Most of you, or many of you anyway, know Joan Straumanis, a philosopher of science and logician. She has supported this research as a program manager at two agencies, the U.S. Department of Education and the National Science Foundation. Her son, Andrei, is an organic chemist who teaches at the University of Texas, Austin, where thousands of his students have benefited from these effective techniques. Bring on the donuts.
Okay, I guess I'm first. I'm going to talk to you about history of this issue of science education reform. And I'm going to start by pointing out an irony. And that is that throughout this presentation, Andre and I are going to be persuading you, we hope, that lecturing and telling are very inefficient and ineffective ways of conveying information. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to lecture and tell. So please forgive the irony because we're going to be lecturing about why lecturing is not efficient. It doesn't work. How do college professors learn how to be educators? Most of them do not study education. Probably they have never taken a course in education. And so how do they learn to teach? Well, they learn to teach as they were taught. And mostly they were taught by lectures. And it's very surprising that anyone learns a whole subject, especially a scientific subject, by listening to lectures. But a few people do manage to do that, and of course, they're the ones who become college professors. So there's another irony for you. The story starts for me with a person named Philip Uri Treisman, who was a graduate student at Berkeley in the 1980s. Uri was in the math department, and he was a TA, teaching assistant in calculus. And he noticed that his Asian students were doing very well in calculus, and that his African American students were doing quite poorly, and many of them were failing. and he was determined to find out why. And everybody said, don't ask. That's not a question you want the answer to. And they had all kinds of assumptions about what explained this discrepancy. Um, and they thought, well, it's a lack of parental support. Not true. The African American students had strong parental support. It was bad high school training. No, it turns out that the African American students who had made it to Berkeley came from pretty good high schools. So what explained it? And he and his team started spending time in the dormitories, watching the students study. And what they discovered was that the Asian students were studying in groups and the African American students were studying all by themselves. And in fact, they were saying that they had always been told that they should always study in a quiet place all by themselves, because if you study with your friends, they'll start distracting you and messing you up, and that's not the way to learn. So there was a very big cultural gap between the Asian students and the African American students. So this became his name was Philip Uri Treisman, but we all knew him as Uri. He got a grant from the Department of Education, the Fund for the Improvement of Post-Secondary Education, FIPSE. You may have heard of it if you're an educator. And I was a staff member at FIPSE, a program manager for many years. And that's how I learned about many of the things we're going to talk about today. So he got a grant from FIPSE, and using that grant, he changed his focus for his dissertation, for his research for his PhD, from a mathematical topic of some sort to mathematics education and how to improve it. And what he discovered by actually photographing and people would crawl on the floor and act as if they weren't there to watch the students studying. And what he discovered was that students who study in groups and quiz each other and explain things to each other learn very well. And students who study all by themselves don't learn as well. So what he did was he gathered the African American students. He did comparisons between the two groups and comparing the changes when he intervened. He gathered the African American students and he taught them how to study together. And once he did that and helped them to learn how to quiz each other and explain things to each other, the gap disappeared. And many of the students in that original cohort group, many of the African American students in that original cohort group, went on to become mathematicians and faculty in mathematics. So that's a very inspiring story. I hope you are inspired by it. That happened in the 1980s. At the same time, other people were experimenting with science education. This was in calculus. That was the difference. That was the study that he did that made such a difference. And calculus is considered a gatekeeper course, along with organic chemistry that Andrei teaches. These are the gatekeeper courses that keep people from going on to more advanced topics in their studies, and prevents people from becoming scientists and doctors and other professionals. So this gatekeeper course was keeping the gate closed for the African American students, but Uri was able to open it. Another person that I'm just going to mention who was active back in the last century, was Priscilla Laws, who did something called activity physics at Dickinson College, and that was lectureless physics. Her objective, she told me, was to um, increase students' physical intuition so that they would learn physics by understanding physics intuitively. And so they did nothing but labs in her physics class. And she designed laboratories that would increase their understanding of physics just by seeing and experiencing physics. Now, this would work, I guess, for Newtonian physics. To be honest, I don't think it would work very well for subatomic physics or uh, uh, anything what's called modern physics, because it's not intuitive. But
Quantum physics.
sorry,
It was quantum physics. I think you were.
quantum physics is not intuitive, right? Quantum mechanics, quantum physics. It's counterintuitive. Nothing makes sense. But she was teaching a kind of physics that does make sense. Um, Later, I became a program manager at National Science Foundation, and there, about 20 years ago, I was the manager of a program called the Science of Learning Centers program. And these were six research centers throughout the country who were studying neuroscience and the science of learning. The research was being done in these multidisciplinary, multi-institutional centers, but I'm going to tell you about only two of them, one at Stanford and one at University of Pittsburgh. Without going into too much detail, what was discovered in these research centers about learning was that just as you can guess from what I've said already, that learning takes place when people embrace the learning and make it their own in stages. And in fact, the discovery was that teaching or teaching by lecturing or telling is the least efficient way of teaching. Students fail to um, they fail to have deep, robust learning when they are lectured to. Better than that is peer telling. That is, if their peers explain things to them, they learn better than if experts, like the professors, talk to them about the same subject. And better than that is if they speak themselves. They explain to themselves by themselves. But best of all the research, all the experiments prove that best of all is teaching another person. So when you teach another person, you learn yourself. And all the things that we're going to talk about for the rest of this presentation will be about various ways of helping people to teach others. And what was done at Stanford was very interesting. They thought that if it works to teach another person, how would it work to teach a computer avatar? And that was done in physics uh, at Stanford. So the physics experiment involved students teaching computer avatars physics that they were trying to learn by explaining to avatars. And at first, the students were lied to. They were told that these avatars represented real people and that they were teaching real people by teaching the avatars, but they weren't. The avatars were just computer uh, constructions. Later, and it worked very well. But later, they changed the experiment and they told the students that the avatars were just computer artifacts. And in fact, they had the students designing their own avatars. So they knew that they were just artifacts, and it worked just as well. So once again, the hierarchy is expert explanation in science and calculus and probably other mathematics um, is the least efficient way of conveying scientific information to students. Peer explanation is better than that. Self-explanation is better still, and teaching another is the most effective of all. Um, so that's the historic background of our presentation. It comes from my experience as a program manager at these various institutions in Washington, and I don't need to tell you that those institutions are being eviscerated and that the funding is disappearing. The Department of Education is almost defunct, and none of this research can continue or take place in the present or the near future. I just want to underline the fact that all of this information came from federal funding of very clever and creative people that were sponsored and funded by these federal institutions, including Andrei. So let me turn the lectern over to another lecturer, my son Andrei.
Thank you, Joan. That was a great setup for what's about to maybe, I hope, blow you guys away because as Joan correctly pointed out, there's pretty much agreement about how students learn and how best to teach students. But I decided, because I just finished my class a few minutes ago before we started this, I am sitting in my classroom and I'll just turn the camera, maybe you can see, there are a lot of seats in this classroom. And 20 minutes ago, they were filled with 500 unruly and stressed out pre-meds. They're actually next door. We can walk over and talk to them if we want. They're next door at a group help session. About 200 of them stayed behind. And that is because we have showed them, the system that I've developed has showed them that thinking works and that they can learn if they ask questions. A lot of students, my colleagues, do not go to a lot of students don't go to my colleagues' office hours because that's not an efficient way to learn. So I'm going to show you a few things. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing here. Uh-oh. No, that's not what I wanted to do. Come on. Let me try that again. Let's do that. All right. So these, you might think these are my students. They are not. These are my peer plus a year mentors. And they are the lifeblood of this course because with 1,000 students in my course, I can't interact. I can't manage them. I can't facilitate their learning. So that's just a nice little picture of the Texas Tower. You guys can see this, right?
Yes, looks
Okay,
good.
great. Okay. So as I was joking before, at any gathering like this, the first thing you should do is give out donuts. So we're going to give out some donuts right now. Joe, you look really ready for a donut. This is a special donut, though. This donut, I think, frames a lot of what Joan was talking about how students learn. students do not learn in their comfort zone. And as we'll see, most students come to my class at least with their comfort zone being memorization. And I should actually, maybe I should clarify and say that, well, no, let's keep going with the donut. Outside this comfort zone, at some point, you push somebody far enough outside their comfort zone and they go into fear. And when the student is in fear, they shut down and no learning can take place. And there's this beautiful term that was coined in a recent article in the Chronicle of Higher Education called pleasurable disquietude. So this has come to be called in my class the donut of pleasurable disquietude. And so the idea here is that you can't learn in your comfort zone, you can't learn in fear, but if you're in this aroused state where there's some kind of disconnect that is causing you some difficulty, you can't integrate it yet, you are in this state of pleasurable disquietude. And what pleasurable disquietude is characterized by is the knowledge from past experience that a dopamine reward is on its way. If you can just figure this out, you're going to get a brain reward. So I just want to start with this donut of pleasurable disquietude. I didn't make this up. Sarah Rose Kavanaugh, who writes for the Chronicle, made this up. I love it though. Okay, so we all know that teaching by telling doesn't work. We being modern faculty. I mean, this in the 80s, certainly no. In the 90s, when I started teaching, in the late 90s, I started teaching, it was an uphill struggle to get people to realize that teaching by telling doesn't work. It is now well agreed upon by pretty much everybody that teaching by telling doesn't work. Most of my colleagues still teach by telling, and we'll talk about why that is. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that change is really hard. Change is really hard. Faculty do try to change the way their students behave. They say, I've been in their classrooms, they say, don't memorize this. The students memorize it. They say, work together. The students work in isolation for the most part. They say, ask questions. Students in my colleagues' classes ask one and only one question. Will this be on the test? That is the only question they ever, it's variations of that. They'll say, on the test, if I'm asked this, should I, and they have these very sophisticated questions about the test. Students are smart. They know what's going on. They know that memorization in isolation is the most efficient preparation for the exams that we give them. And so that's a failing of the assessments, the exams that most people give. And if we get a chance at the end, I have some ideas about how we can, I actually call it my big idea for changing everything. So if we get a chance at the end, we can talk about that. But exams are a big problem. If we just change the exams, as I have done in my classroom, I didn't just change, but I changed my exams so that they are conceptually based. They're very difficult to prepare for using memorization. The result, student complaints. And other faculty in my field, organic chemistry, have done this and gotten worse than complaints. You might have read in the New York Times a few years ago, Maitland Jones, who's a very famous organic chemistry professor, was essentially fired from NYU because 80 or 90 of his students signed a petition stating that his exams were unfair. So you change the exams so that students can't memorize for them. What you initially get is massive resistance and student complaints. What you need to do is you need to change culture. You need to change culture because just changing the exams is just going to cause student complaints, and you need to change mindset. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I change culture and mindset in my classroom, 15 minutes before this. This is real life stuff. This is how the work that was done in the 80s and 90s has led to all of this. So how do we change culture? I think you should be able to see and hear this little clip from my classroom. So I'm going to play this little clip so you can see. You can't tell and how unimaginably loud it is. But so you might notice everyone's talking. Some people have their hands up. People have models in their hands. There are these Peer Plus a Year tutors, which I have, who are standing in the aisles. Were you guys able to hear the audio on that?
No.
No.
Okay, all right. Well, it's pretty loud. Everyone's talking at once in this giant room that I'm in. So the goal to change culture, we have to change their attitude and their mindset and convince them that thinking works. These students have come out of high schools and other systems where memorization was the most effective way for them to most efficiently prepare for the exam. They don't believe in thinking. They don't see the point in trying to figure anything out. And it is getting worse. Let me tell you, ChatGPT, you may think it's an interesting tool. You have no idea. I ask my brightest students to do something and they don't think about it at all. They ask GPT first thing how to think about it. First thing, it's terrifying. Anyway, so these students, what they're doing in class, what are they doing? They are doing sort of almost like an escape room type of puzzle. I've given them some kind of data to explore, and it's just enough data so that they can figure out some concept in chemistry. And then I ask them some leading questions that get them to apply that proto concept that they've invented for themselves. So within their group, they're having really rich, robust discussions about organic chemistry. And maybe this is a nice time to say that I don't think Priscilla Laws thought that her mission was to teach physics. I don't think that Uri Treisman was really trying to teach calculus in the end. And I have relatively little attachment to my students learning organic chemistry. That's because most of them are pre-meds. They don't need organic chemistry to be doctors. What am I teaching them? What was Priscilla Laws teaching them? What Uri Treisman teaching them? The answer is we're trying to teach them how to learn and think. Organic chemistry is a playing field for those conversations. And in those conversations, students are figuring out what, by analogy to a famous sort of tennis help book you might have heard of, I call the inner game of organic chemistry. There's a famous book called The Inner Game of Tennis. Anyway, one of the mottos of my course is mastering the inner game is the key to winning the game. So my students, I think, quickly understand thinking works and that the key to being able to be successful in anything difficult is mastering that inner game, all that that stuff that goes inside their heads, including their anxieties and their fears and stuff like that. In this effort to teach them organic chemistry or help them learn organic chemistry, I actually object to the verb teach. I don't think you can teach anyone anything challenging, certainly in STEM. But that effort to facilitate their learning is impossible in a 1,000-student course without these peer plus a year learning assistants. I recruit them from my previous year's class, and it's not always the very best students. I choose them based on lots of criteria. I have one assigned per row, so they have about 15 to 20 students each in a very large UT class. That's very unusual to have any type of personal connection to anybody in the giant lecture. And these peer plus a year learning assistants, they're passing on what they got when they were students. They really appreciated their LA support and their peer plus learning assistants, we call them LAs. They really appreciate their LA support and they are really eager, super eager to pass it on to others. And so now we're really pulling in what Joan said, teaching as I was taught. So now we have these students. Now, granted, they're mostly going to be doctors. They're not going to be academics. Doctors are teachers though, right? I mean, when you walk into a doctor's office, if they really are being effective, they are going to be facilitating your engagement in your own health and learning process. So I think that a lot of what I'm doing is having an impact as these thousands of students go off to medical school from my course. I think they are teaching as I was taught, as they were taught in my course in their places. A friend of mine is the director of a residency program. And she says she knows a lot about what I'm doing. And she says there are two kinds of residents that come into her program, those who understand the inner game and those who don't. And she has to teach them. The first thing she has to do is teach them how to communicate and how to understand themselves and how we assimilate new knowledge. So there's a deep connection between these LAs and the students, and that's also a huge component. And that is really what Treisman's PDP program was all about. He was trying to get students connected to each other, to the material. The phrase he used was participation in a scientific community. And the key word there is not scientific, it's community. That when they felt they were part of something, they, maybe they were talking about where to do your laundry near campus, but that's just as valuable in a way in terms of figuring out how to function as a student and be successful as understanding what, a second derivative is. Okay, so in my course, all the chemistry is reinforced through homeworks and online lectures that are recorded. So it has all the components of a traditional course, but there's this experience that happens every day in class. They're working in a group of 3 to try and figure out some kind of puzzle. They're figuring out that thinking works. They're believing in their big brains. And so then they begin to change the culture. It's changing culture at UT. In biochemistry, my colleagues are beginning to teach this way. And by breaking down some of the resistance to this, I think I'm opening up doors for others to try it also. So what do I use class time for besides this group work? I do think it's important to have a little bit of a cult of personality within a classroom. So I try to speak for at least 10 or 15 minutes every class, do something fun. This is actually from today's course. Let's see if you can get the video. Students are working on the #1 most common misconception in all of chemistry. You guys want to learn some chemistry right now. Most people think that breaking bonds releases energy. It is absolutely the opposite. Formation of bonds lowers the energy of the system and releases energy. So when I bring together 2 atoms and show a bond forming, to reinforce this, my students are asked to do this little interpretive dance to show that there's an energy wave coming out of our faux molecular system. So here they go. So they all were simulating that energy wave coming out at them. Anyway, I use class time for that sort of thing. And here I am doing, I don't know if we can get you can tell you don't have audio. So here we are doing some deep breaths.
Can you turn on the audio?
I don't think I can. There's got to be a way, but I can't. So right now we're doing some deep breathing. This guy right here in the front row is taking notes, but I don't think it's on the deep breathing. So I was leading the class in some deep breaths prior to the beginning of a quiz for practical reasons. They do better on the quiz, but also so that they can learn to master this inner game, which is critical, right? Treisman, his conclusion, why are these Black students failing? The answer was anxiety, disorientation, and isolation. That's what's hard about learning organic chemistry. It's not the organic chemistry. It's the anxiety, disorientation, and isolation. It's the inner game, right? Self-esteem, self-knowledge, and the most important skill for any college student, for anyone trying to learn anything, is metacognition, the ability to identify, do I understand yet? Did I just make a connection that's important? Are there other connections that are happening around me in my group that I don't have yet? How can I ask more questions? Right. This is, I am in Texas, and I do have quite a number of Christians in my class, I'm sure. So quoting Jesus always earns me points. But this same idea here, that we can hand somebody a fish to memorize, or we can teach them how to learn. Oh, there's some data.
There's some good questions in the chat.
Okay, let's do that. Because the only thing I've left is data showing you that the data I've collected that shows this works, not just works a little bit, works incredibly well. Do you want me to look at the data first, Joan, or should we answer some questions first?
Let's answer some questions just to break things up.
Good idea.
The first question, somebody wanted to know how Uri's first name is spelled.
I did. I already answered that.
You answered that. Okay. The next question is, who pays for the peer plus a year tutors, or do they get academic credit?
Academic credit. And I have to turn them away. I have hundreds of applications for my 90 spots.
Okay. The other thing I guess I wanted to talk to you about is I don't think you have made enough given enough emphasis to the fact that you have done a lot of work before the class ever was conceived by designing these activities, these graduated activities in organic chemistry.
I think it's worth, notice there's an acronym on the screen right now, POGIL, and I have to give a ton of credit to my colleague Rick Moog, who was a grantee. Joan was his program officer, which is how I met him in 1997. So 29 years ago, he got a FIPSI grant Joan was his program officer. She introduced us, and we have started a lifelong collaboration in which we developed this POGO project along with now hundreds and hundreds of other people. About 5% of all chemistry classrooms in the country use this POGO teaching method that I'm describing. Now, granted, most of them are in very small classrooms with 10 and 15 students. In order to have any real impact, you need to have impact in one of these large classes, and that's why I'm working here at UT to try and scale this up. But yes, there's a lot of effort that goes into developing what I described as these um, escape room type puzzles that sort of create questions for students to try and answer in their groups in order for them to do stuff in their groups and have real strong interactions and those aha moments, those dopamine rewards that convince them that thinking works. They need to have a suitably difficult set of challenges that they're working on together.
And what does POGIL stand for? POGIL.
They can Google it. It stands for Process-Oriented Guided Inquiry Learning. And the only reason we have an acronym is because we can't get NSF funding without an acronym.
Another thing you do that I think is very important, you might describe, is you do what I call meta teaching. That is, you tell the students or teach the students why you're teaching the way you are, so that they understand why your classroom is different, and they understand the value and the effectiveness of it.
I wish. The truth is that they are stressed out pre-meds and they are very resentful whenever I take class time to talk about what this is interesting, they pejoratively label as TED Talks. Of course, I point out to them that the subtitle of TED Talks is Ideas Worth Spreading. So they think that they're dissing me by saying, you're taking up too much class time with these TED Talks. Here's what I'm doing differently this year. For the first time this year, I have decided I'm going to let my former students, these Peer Plus a Year LAs, communicate directly with the class. And in order to communicate with the class, I had to have a venue that wasn't part of the class. Well, where do all these students congregate? Where do they spend hundreds of hours probably? Is that possible? A week? Yes, they do probably spend hundreds of hours. Rebecca, where do they spend my sister? I'm asking my sister this question. Where do all my students spend lots of time every week?
Somewhere fun.
No, come on,
Dancing?
think. No, not dancing.
Eating?
Oh my gosh, someone help her. Anybody know anything about
Please.
young people today?
Oh,
Social
on their
media.
phone.
The library and the cafeteria.
The
No.
library and the cafeteria is a great guess, but
On
that's
their
not the answer.
phone.
If they're in the
on their
library or the
phone.
cafeteria, and what are they doing when they're on their phone?
Social media.
Yep, they're on Instagram. So my feeling is other people have sort of criticized this and said, hey, you're just contributing to this terrible addiction that they have, this dopamine addiction. I said, well, if I'm trying to teach smokers about themselves, I got to meet them in the smoking section. So we have started a class Instagram. I don't know if you noticed at the beginning, you can voyeur into our class Instagram. It's the letter I, HEARTOCHEM, I Heart OChem. So you can, I think I have it at the very beginning, actually. Oh, sorry. The I Heart OChem Instagram page is the way that I am hoping that some of this inner game coaching will take place. And now, let me be clear, about 50% of my students immediately understand what I'm doing. They appreciate it enormously because they don't have to memorize anymore. They're excited. They're getting these dopamine rewards immediately from the second day of class. Or first day even, they're on board. Now, the question is, how do I reach that last 5 or 10%? And that's sort of where the Instagram page is coming into play. I'm trying really hard to change my channels so that I can reach more students and get them to it. So,
Andrei, there's another question here. Well, let me go back a bit. Yes. What do you put on the quizzes since your focus is community and thinking?
They resent anything that's content related outside of organic chemistry. They think I am prepared. They believe that I am preparing them for the MCAT, that that's my job and that's their job. And they don't realize that the key to doing well in the MCAT is the inner game, figuring out how to deal with their stress, their anxiety, get over the joining anxiety they have about talking to other students, learning how to essentially use their brains. But a lot of times, students are stuck. They think from their years of experience that they can't know something unless they are told that something. It's really hard to understand this generation without working with them. They say things to me without any irony like that. They say, how can I know the right answer if you don't tell me the right answer? And I say, because the right answer fits with the data. But you can understand why we have a problem, why so many people were following this fellow, this tragic fellow, Charlie, who, what's his last name? But people who follow others and just believe what they say is going to be the unraveling of this whole thing we've built, that you all have built. I mean, I'm part of it too, but it is a serious problem. Students have forgotten that thinking works.
And
Another question is, do you use the same techniques with chemistry majors? Not pre-meds.
The answer is I am a professor of instruction. And so the highly paid and Nobel Prize worthy research professors are given the privilege of teaching the majors. They don't let me anywhere near them. And they use straight lecture.
would this work, another question is, would this work with physical chemistry?
I taught physical chemistry a number of semesters here, and it worked really well. My colleague, Rick Moog, teaches physical chemistry and general chemistry. And there's lots of people who teach using all kinds of topics. In fact, when we got one of the grants we got from the National Science Foundation was to bring this method into calculus. So there's calculus and pre-calculus materials that are being used all around the country. So it works in any subject where logic is involved. Basically, any subject where thinking is involved. You can do this in history, certainly in economics, anything that involves thinking.
And logic itself.
And logic itself.
Well, talk about the we interrupted you so that we didn't get to hear about the comparisons.
Okay, so here's some data. This is just give you a sense of the setup. It was a very nice natural experiment 2 years ago. The most popular lecturer at UT, a fellow named Iverson, famous and brilliant guy, was on leave. So I ended up with the majority of the organic chemistry 1 students. To understand this data, you have to understand how organic chemistry is taught. It's broken into 2 semesters. And in the first semester, all the concepts are developed. And in the second semester, it's mostly application. There's a lot of application to biochemistry, and so your grade in the second semester is a good indicator of whether you had good preparation in the first semester. So that's the premise here to this data. So in this year, in the fall of 2023, I taught the majority of the Organic Chemistry 1 courses. 798 of my students went on to Organic 2, along with 671 of the lecture taught Organic 1 students. And they all went into a bunch of Organic 2 sections. Now, I taught a section with 371 students. So those students are sort of out of the comparison because they elected to take Organic 2 with me using the same method. But there wasn't space for them in my section. So 427 of my students elected to go into this fellow Iverson's course, as well as some other people who taught Organic 2 that semester. So there were 671 lecture students and 427 in the my students in the comparison. We're going to call these the comparison students. These are the control students, and these are the treatment students. So we can use grades in this section and these sections here. We can compare these students, see how they did in Organic 2. So here is the data. These orange bars are my students. So you can see that my students did significantly better than the lecture-trained students. It's a huge effect size, about 33%, 33% more A's from my students in these same sections. These professors who taught these sections had no idea who came from my section or another. There was no real opportunity for bias. These were the same exact exams, the same exact material. So this is a really large effect. Impressed even my chair, who is a diehard lecturer, that we should be collecting more data like this. Now, she didn't say we should be teaching more classes like this. She said we should collect more data. This is really interesting. So the question is, what would those 371 students have done? Maybe 371 students who stayed with me for Organic 2, maybe those were my weakest students, and my strongest students went into Iverson's class. And that's why they did so well compared to the lecture. Well, let's take a look. We know these 371 students took Organic 1 with me alongside these 427 students, and we have that data, and here it is. So we can see that the orange students who were the experimental group over here, they actually constituted a significant cut below the top students in my course. The top students on my course makes sense. They wanted to stay with me for Organic 2. They had advanced status. They knew to register. They had all these things going for them that allowed them to register for me for Organic 2. So we can say not only was this orange group not an exemplary group, it represented a pretty average, a below average set of my students. So if these blue students had been forced to go into someone else's Organic 2 course, they probably would have done even better than, these students got 67% of them got A's, probably even more would have gotten A's. So that's pretty much the data. I have lots of other data, but that's just a snapshot of the type of data that I've collected that has convinced me that not only are we changing culture, not only do we have 500 students who are all talking at once, none of them sleeping, very few of them on their phone. Not only do they write to me from medical school saying, hey, the most important thing you taught me was day one in medical school, look for study group partners. So all these sort of anecdotal things are interesting, but this is the data that people turns people's head and say, wow, you're also teaching them all this inner game stuff, and it's having an effect on the outer game, right? Because of course, if there's an inner game, what is the outer game? The outer game in organic chemistry is an A in organic chemistry and a top score on the MCAT. And we see that that's happening also. All right, I'm going to shut up and let people ask questions, or Joan respond to any of this.
There's another question about the degree of buy-in from your fellow faculty members.
The younger faculty are curious. The older faculty some of them are
Hostile.
Hostile is not the right word, defensive, because they are so invested in the idea of being the sage on the stage. Their egos have been stroked for so many years by standing here and having people quietly listen to them. Those of you who are not professors, I'd be curious to know how many former professors you have in the room, but it is an intoxicating feeling to have 500 people listen, hang on your words. And, my colleague Iverson, he's a master. I go to his class largely because it's just fun. He tells great stories, and knowing organic chemistry, I don't miss anything. I think his students don't get the chemistry, but they do get a lot of the stories, and it's a beautiful thing standing in front of a group of people, and they are really reluctant to give that up.
And of course, they learned that way.
Yeah.
Because as I said, they were the best students in their classes when they were students. They learned by listening to lectures, and they were the only ones who did. Okay, other questions?
Riley had a question. Why don't you go ahead and ask it, Riley? Or I'll ask it for him. What is the degree of buy-in from your fellow faculty
There we
members?
go. There we
There
go.
you are.
Yeah, well, I was the one who was asking about the buy-in because I'm a retired elementary school teacher, and when I was brand new, they introduced a curriculum in teaching math that was really quite radically different from just the standard textbook and Xerox copy exercises that we gave the kids, and it was very manipulative, very group oriented kind of a thing, and I liked it very much. But I was a new teacher, and I was into it, and there were a lot of, well, frankly, fairly jaded older teachers who just weren't into it. And at the end of the period of time when we were using that curriculum, there were boxes and boxes of these manipulatives. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars the district has spent on these things to use for this new program that were pristine. They weren't even used. And I found that out years later. It was kind of discouraging, but it kind of fits with what you said about the response to your colleagues at the college level.
Well, I think that
Can you
go
say a
ahead.
little more about other schools that you've taught at and just in general, the state of the country about looking at that? How many people know about it? And I have to go in a minute myself, but anyway, I would like to hear some more, a broader thing about how faculty look at it.
Well, change is very difficult. Change is very difficult. I think that's the only thing you can really say. There is over 30 years that I've been doing this, 29 years I've been doing this. It's gone from a big problem if you talk about discovery learning, experiential learning, group learning, for getting a job, for example, to a absolute prerequisite. You have to give some sort of lip service to modern teaching methods, but you just have to give lip service to it. You don't actually have to do it, and doing it, you won't get, I think a lot of places don't give a lot of support for it. And certainly the older faculty are very invested in being the sage on the stage. I think it is changing, but it's really slow. I think the old folks are going to retire soon, and the new folks are coming through, and all the more reason to try and have money to try and amplify best practices so that people coming into the field of teaching are able to quickly and easily find resources and data that's convincing. I mean, the data I've collected, that's the most powerful message I give to my colleagues as well as my students. On the first day of class, I don't wait 3 minutes before showing the data that I just showed you, because they get buy-in, and the buy-in is absolutely critical. There's no way for anybody to do anything like this without believing in it. Students have to believe in it.
Joe has a question.
Andrei, what you've been talking about reminds me so much of stuff that I did in the 80s and 90s, and after that. I'm a gatekeeper course graduate in mathematics in this case. I ended up spending a lot of time in finance and dealing in labor negotiations. And our chief negotiator and I were the people that would face off with the unions. One thing that he did that sure reminds me of what you've been talking about, but he was doing this 40 years ago. The union would hardly get through just one point, and he would stop and say, okay, and he would repeat back to them what he had heard. And then he would say, let me make your argument for you as I have heard it. And he literally would repeat their argument back to them. Got a couple of things out of that. One, he learned it better, as you pointed out. And two, it, of course, gave the union some confidence that they were being heard. Any comments on that?
Well, I would say I have a lot of course mottos, and one of them is, if you're talking, then you're learning.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that we have a broken idea of what teaching and learning is, and the scientists in this field are trying for 40 years now to get us to learn and listen, and it's very slow in happening. But I think I started this, I led with the problem with the exams, because assessment drives learning. That's also a motto, not just my motto, but anywhere in science education, especially. Assessments drive the learning. And if you have bad assessments that encourage memorization, you can stand up there and tell students to think and talk and discuss, and they will not do it, because the most efficient path to success is still memorization. And I don't know if people want to hear my big idea for changing everything.
Oh, yes, please.
Please do.
So the big idea for changing everything is not obvious to most people, because most people don't know that learning is a conversation. And once I think that's accepted, now we have a chance for the following to occur. Instead of assessing them based on what they write down on a piece of paper over the course of 3 or 4 hours during the semester, what we're going to end up doing once we deal with some privacy issues and some bias issues. Luckily, I say this, I shouldn't even joke, but the bias issues are being swept under the rug by current situation. But anyway, the idea would be to record every word that every student says during every single class, not just in my class, but maybe in every class at the University of Texas. And if all of those classes are conversations about not just random conversations, light conversations, they are in-depth conversations about difficult concepts where they are trying really hard to feel their way towards a solution, to try and teach each other, that if all of these conversations were recorded, then we could very quickly produce exemplar behaviors in terms of the AI being able to recognize students who were behaving empathetically, students who were not just getting the content, but getting the content in a deep and robust way, and then helping others to understand it. And so the assessment of these students would no longer be an exam and a score, but it would be a broad spectrum analysis of their capabilities and potential, not just as a physician, but maybe granular detail, a dermatologist or a family therapist or a social worker, or whether they are good leadership material, all sorts of fine details. You may or may not know that the field of recruitment and employee hiring has gone absolutely bonkers in the last 1,006 days, because 1,006 days ago, ChatGPT was introduced. And now, if you have children or grandchildren who've been applying for jobs, my son just recently applied for a job and somehow got it. They have 50,000 applications because the applicants are using AI to generate applications. And then, of course, the employers are using AI to screen the applications. So there's this crazy arms race on, and being able to reliably and accurately tell medical schools and employers, this student has these strengths and these weaknesses, would be an incredible advancement in terms of that economic activity, of trying to find, not to mention the billion with a B, actually, I think it's now $10 billion test prep market for the MCAT, the SAT. $10 billion a year is spent on prepping students for these tests, basically trying to beat the test so that the test no longer really can differentiate or measure whether students are going to be effective physicians or effective Harvard undergraduates. And so you could replace all of this with a system that really works. Anyway, that's my big idea for changing everything.
I was going to contribute a little anecdote. When I was dean at Lehigh University, I used to have this argument, the arguments we're having today, I mean, with, for example, my math department, which consisted entirely of experienced professors of mathematics who lectured. And as I used to point out to them, if students could learn calculus from a lecture, then they could learn calculus from the book, and they don't even need you.
Mm.
I don't think that's accurate. I think that there's something that happens in the cult of personality in a classroom. I think that that's a logical statement, but it turns out that Zoom doesn't work as well as in person. And there's something, it's not the way I smell. It's just having a 3D person in the room does make a difference. And like I said, I showed how I speak for 10 or 15 minutes every class period, because the cult of personality does matter. It matters in terms of motivation, in terms of leadership. And so these people who are very skilled lecturers, their students do much better on assessments. And the reason is not because students are learning during these lectures. It's because the lecturer is inspiring the students to go home and figure it out on their own.
Okay, that's fair. But I'm speaking for myself. I learned all the mathematics that I knew as a math major, and as an undergraduate, as a high school student. I got it all from the book.
You are not a model for anything. I mean, Joan, where are you going next month? Are you going to like Fiji or something?
Yes.
And then are you going to northern Sweden to watch the Northern Lights?
Yes, I am. What,
Are you also the oldest person in this Zoom room?
Yes, I think so.
So you're not the model for anything, I'm afraid.
She's a model for me.
Well, she should be on
She's the oldest, though.
She should be the cover on a magazine in that sense of a model, yes.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think she's the oldest.
This is getting too personal.
Yes. I was just going to mention one thing that you made me think of, and that is Hillary brought up the idea of each one teach one. This was very big in the golden era of Hoosier education in the 50s. And it was not uncommon for us in grade school in reading to be paired off, to read to one another. And I've always loved reading, and we could help each other. We learned already then in first, second, third grade to help each other learn. And those were skills that we also used in university, working in language to perfect your accent or to do little things. So that's always been a model that speaks to me. And I'm thrilled to see what you're doing in these huge classes with the LAs. It's wonderful.
Well, I think what we're doing here is not that new. In fact, I think there was a fellow back a few years ago. What was his name? Aristotle. And his school started with an A also, right? Didn't he do a lot of this stuff too? Oh no, Socrates really is the one.
Socrates, right. So back at you. I just want to point out to everybody that I'm very pleased that Andrei went into the family business.
Well, we are all very pleased that you did as well, and that you could be with us today. This has been fascinating. And to have the two of you kind of tag teaming was really fun as well.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions that we forgot, omitted, didn't know?
Bill had a question.
Bill, I think Bill had a question that we didn't get to. Why don't you unmute yourself and ask your question, Bill?
It's actually not me, it's Adele, but she'll talk to you.
Yeah, okay. I had sent this as a text kind of thing. I'm wondering, Andrei, if you found any techniques, strategies for getting other faculty, I guess showing them the data is one.
Super powerful.
But is there anything else that does it help to get people to incorporate some of your methods and then the next year maybe go further into it? Maybe doing it all at once is too challenging for most faculty.
That's a really good point. And I think that when you look at the innovations that have spread pretty widely, Eric Mazur, I don't know if you've heard of him. He was a Harvard physics professor who really advanced the use of clickers, these electronic polling systems in large classes. And now, of course, students all own a phone and can respond to polls. So that, yeah, I think, Adele, your point is well taken, that having some kind of baby steps available is critical. But at the same time, I would say that it's almost like saying, we're going to get healthy by running up and down the stairs for 5 minutes, and then we're going to smoke the rest of the time. If you lecture for 55 minutes and then, or 45 minutes and do clicker questions for 5 minutes, yes, you can improve engagement in your classroom. But I think that my emphasis, the thing that has been the game changer for me is changing the culture. And in order to change the culture, you kind of have to give up lecture and take your lumps.
So what are your ideas about, besides showing them the data, how to get other faculty? You've tried. So has anything succeeded with anyone at UT? Or
I think that retirement and
what?
and when people who want to lecture and exclusively lecture are all covered up and tucked in at the end of their careers, I think it will be a little easier. The younger faculty are definitely much more interested. I think the one thing I could say that convinces faculty is when I can show them that it is both easier, less work. As you know, as academics, there's an enormous pressure to publish, and research is the primary responsibility of every research active faculty member at UT. So if I can show them that it can be done with less effort and that it's more fun, that can be kind of convincing. I've had people come up to me, many people come up to me actually at conferences and say, hey, I was ready to retire. I was so bored with teaching. This has rejuvenated every aspect of my life. I go to class excited to go interact with students and become a part of this community that I created in my classroom.
But it's very relevant. Andrei, we discussed something before while we were preparing for this. We were talking about Semmelweis.
Right.
The gynecologist and the 19th century gynecologist Ignaz Semmelweis, who discovered that washing your hands between patients who were giving birth greatly reduced the death rate of his patients. They didn't get fever. We were talking about this. What's the relevance?
Well, I mean, I don't know if you want to pull this all the way into it, but for sure it is absolutely relevant. And people should know that you called it hand washing. And at the time, I don't think they either had strong enough soap, or whether maybe I'm not a surgeon. I don't think strong soap does the job in terms of killing enough bacteria on your fingernails and your hands in order to really eliminate. Gloves are required for modern surgery. And in that time, the procedure for sterilizing your hands was a soak in a highly toxic, well, not toxic, highly caustic solution of trisodium phosphate. And that chapped the hands of the surgeons who adopted Semmelweis's advice were chapped and burning all the time and bleeding probably. So there was a huge cost to this innovation, to adopting this innovation. So I think that the answer to Joan's question is yes, if you can tie the benefits of the innovation to the people who are in the decider role, in this case, the surgeons, if you can show the surgeons data that many more lives are saved, then it will be worth the short-term suffering of dipping your hands in TSP and having chapped and bleeding hands all the time. And the most interesting part of this story is that in the same, Joan, I don't know if you've verified this, but in the same issue of Lancet, the medical journal at the time, in the same issue was an article on the effectiveness of ether as an anesthetic. And that's exactly the opposite sort of situation. The surgeons all could immediately see the value. No more pieces of wood stuffed into the mouths of their screaming patients. No more heavy straps strapping them down. The surgeons made the decision throughout the known world. Within 6 weeks, this news had spread throughout the world, and ether was being used as an anesthetic throughout the world, whereas Semmelweis's hand dips was not really widely accepted as something you have to do for 150 years.
That's the point. I think the point, the connection with these educational methods is that we know what works, we know what's good, but we can't persuade our colleagues to adopt these methods. So as Andrei said, you have to wait for them to retire.
But we're made part of the way they're evaluated. You know, here at U of California, people get evaluated every 3 to 5 years.
Based on the student popularity scores.
Well, no, but
No,
what
that's
if
been
what if
it's
what if
changing.
what if they got
Not
credit
here.
for changing their method? What if they got a lot of credit for changing their teaching method?
Yeah, I mean, it would be wonderful if there was data, easy to collect data. It's very, very difficult to collect data on student learning. The experiment that fell into my lap is quite unusual.
Well, they might not need the data. Someone might be impressed enough by what you've done that they would just decide to make that part of the. You're the Bill's job right now as a retiree is to go through the files for people who are being evaluated. So what would you say?
I'm going to give Andrei answer this question, which I think you and I both know there's a good answer to it, but I think it's the question that you will constantly be harangued by. There's not enough time to do what you do. I've got to get my students through all of this material, and so I have to lecture. And in fact, I have to speed up my lectures and put as many slides up as I can in.
Okay, I know I'm speaking to a real academic because this is the number one question I'm asked at workshops as I go around and talk about to chemistry professors about this. They all say exactly what Bill just said, which is how can you cover all of this, allowing students to discover the material? And the answer is, for my field, it is the case that a very small number of well-constructed concepts explain a huge array, and my colleagues end up going through all these examples that my students never see, but they still do better on the MCAT. They still do better in Organic 2 because the concepts are more powerful than having been exposed to a wide array, superficially, a wide array of examples. And I think that's definitely the case in pretty much any logical field. Concepts are more powerful than
students, the faculty think I have to throw all this material at the students.
Yeah, that's what they think.
Through. That is,
perception.
Get a little bit through, which you do by getting them engaged with a question, gives them the resources to go get a lot. Whereas lecturing at them rapid fire.
Well, it has little value. And lecturing, that's the other piece of the puzzle, is not only are they unnecessarily covering too many examples. Instead of going for depth, they're going for breadth. But the mode of learning by lecture just doesn't work. So it's highly ineffective for two different reasons.
So Andrei, I'm thinking we have at UCSD some kind of a teaching center that supports faculty on teaching. Would there be either access to this talk or to something else you put together that they could view, or something that might inspire someone in our teaching center to encourage people to go this route?
And we also have to persuade the deans and the department chairs and the people who do the evaluation of the faculty.
But is there something you've done or written or a video or even using this that would be most appropriate to convey to these offices?
I think I am remiss. My nose has been to the grindstone, and I'm waking up from this period of trying to change culture here at UT. And someone else asked, and I never really got to answer, what happens, maybe it was, I can't remember who it was, but what happens at other institutions? The answer is I've been to several different institutions, and there's an induction period where students there's a lag where students are highly resistant to changing, especially the exams, so that the first step is to take away memorization as a tool. Once you've taken away memorization as a tool, the students begin to search for its replacement, and then they are finally willing to accept the possibility that they're using their brain to think about the material is a viable strategy. And so it happens at every institution, but I think eventually there'll be broad enough coverage of these ideas. The answer really to your question, Adela, is that I need to publish my data, and I haven't done it yet. I've actually applied to write an article in a scholarship of teaching and learning journal that's pretty well read. So if I get a invitation to write all this up in that, then I will be publishing it this summer.
Okay. Do you use multiple choice questions still and just make them more conceptual, or do
Sure.
you?
I mean, nowadays you don't
That's
have
what I
to
used to do.
you don't have to rely on A, B, C, D anymore. Now we have AI that evaluates the students. Um, it can actually even read letters and numbers pretty well. It can read words. So in today's quiz, I had 1,000 students who all gave a one-word response to something, and there wasn't a word bank. There was no multiple choice. They had to actually come up with a word from their heads. But the AI will still grade and sort those questions. It'll probably kick out 400 of them because it was illegible, but at least 600 of them will get auto-graded. So the sophistication of my questions has gone up enormously. You don't know a lot of organic chemistry. It's hard for you to probably appreciate this, but organic chemistry has a visual language involving curved arrows. You've probably seen them somewhere. And so the AI is pretty close. Soon it will be able to evaluate these curved arrows.
Wow. That's exciting.
Riley asked a question I thought was really good, and that is, did you have a mentor yourself?
Yeah, Rick Moog. Was, like I said, he was a grantee, a FIPSI grantee and Joan was his program officer, and we've been friends. You can Google him. He is my co-founder in the POGO project, along with 4 other people who have all since they're deceased. We're the only 2 living members, I think. No, I think actually maybe MOOG. Yeah, there's Rick Moog. He's retired from Franklin and Marshall College. Brilliant person, incredible idea person, as well as motivator of other people. So yeah, absolutely want to acknowledge him.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
I just have a comment, and that is that I applaud you for regenerating thinking as a worthwhile option, seeing as we seem to have generations who have forgotten how. And it seems to me that when you're trying to sell your idea across the board to other educators, they certainly value thinking. And if you emphasizing the fact that thinking is becoming a lost art due to electronics largely, and cell phones and AI and whatever, and that the lack of it is part of the reason that we're losing democracy, that there's a broader application of this whole thing.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I definitely feel extra pressure to get my students to think for themselves, especially here in the state of Texas. But as you may have heard very recently, not one of my colleagues here at UT, but a Texas A&M professor was fired by the governor for simply showing a slide in class where the possibility of more than 2 genders was described. So I think that there's it's kind of a race to see whether we can bring back thinking or whether it will be snuffed out.
It's a race to the bottom, especially in your state. Very discouraging.
But I have to be careful what I say. I honestly have to be careful what I say here in class.
Because you're in Texas, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, the Board of Regents is appointed by the governor, and the governor, and the governor's values don't align with most faculty members. So we're all being quite careful what we say and do.
Even informally.
Yeah, I mean, I should probably be careful what I'm saying right here. The Gestapo is real. Students are the ones who got that A&M professor fired. They took video of her without asking permission, but it was a public lecture. So they caught her, so to speak.
They caught her. Actually, it was an elementary education class, and she was showing some books that were available to children that mentioned the possibility that there are some people who are either intersex or non-binary. So she wasn't even expressing her own opinion. She was showing some books. She was.
Well, the problem with the loss of thinking is that indoctrination is so simple when people don't think. They're
Right.
very easy to indoctrinate, and that's what we're fighting.
So are there any other comments or questions or suggestions?
I love that we're ending on this cheery note.
You know, I was just going to say the same thing, Andrei, that thank you very much for talking with us today, and Joan, of course, on that bright note that we just had. But we really appreciate it. This has been really interesting from some, especially for people like me who never taught, and to hear what it's like to teach and what are the new concepts, and also very much thank you from all of us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It was been a lot of fun.
And it was a pleasure to work with Andrei. This was really nice.
Okay, thank you again.
Oh, we have a comment from a
Oh, you
current.
do? Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Malka, do you want to make your comment out loud?
I was just saying, I appreciated listening to this because it made me realize that I took a chemistry 101 course my freshman year, and I did notice a significant difference between that class and my biology 101, just the prerequisites, because I was in a study group with like 3 or 4 other girls, and I think I learned a lot more just from that group than in the class. Like we helped each other learn versus the biology class where I was learning independently. And I think there was a difference. So listening to this from you and Andrei was really informational. I'm going to try to tell my classmates about it and see if we can get more study groups together.
And you're taking biochemistry now, right?
Yeah, that's right. Just started.
So this is inside information. This is my granddaughter, Malka.
Not my child. That's my sister's kid.
Thank you again so much. This was
Again.
great.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Joan.